Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Build Computers and kind of Let's Fix Computers as well. This one's a bit of both, no idea what title it'll be under. I've got a Novatech build here who's a system integrator in the UK. This is a Zalman Z11 Plus case, which is one of my most disliked cases of all time. This is everything I don't like in a computer case. It's all sort of alien shapes with bulges and stuff, and it's quite an old case, this, I think, and it's got some bits on it that could be good, but it's so poorly thought out that anything on it that might be good is nullified by being annoying, in terms of just complete lack of expandability and stuff like that. We'll see more of it as we get into it. Anyway, there's two things we're doing with this today. This got zapped by a power surge quite some time ago, according to the client. They brought it in here for diagnostics. It was not running properly, etc., etc. I was going to make a diagnostic video about it. However, when I got into doing that diagnostic video, I basically found that the graphics card was dead, everything else was fine, and that was it. And I was like, that's boring, I'm throwing this video out. Which ironically was why there was no video at the weekend, because it was going to be this and then it wasn't. I was like, a dead graphics card is boring. It wasn't even an entertaining death. It was just you turn it on and there was a red bar down the, red artifacts on screen kind of thing. It was like, yeah, that's a dead graphics card. Go home. It's the end of the video. However, the client wants to rehouse this, which is good because I don't like this case. I actually floated the idea to them because when they brought it in, I'm going to start taking it apart while I talk. I have to lay it off the end of the counter because these bulges are on the front panel. So the case physically cannot lie flat on a desk. Whatever. Where was I? Yeah, so when the customer came in, they were kind of making noises that they were a bit, I don't know, disenfranchised might not be the word, or bored, or just, they were kind of not really sure what they were doing with this computer. It's 3rd gen Intel, I believe. So, it's getting on a bit. And they were like, I can't afford a new computer, but this thing's getting a bit long in the tooth. And I said to him, well, if you want a refresh, then rehouse your computer, which is something I could do for you if you wanted. Put it in a new case, basically. Put it in a nice, shiny new case with any new parts we need to fix it. And, you've got the same CPU and motherboard and all the rest of there in there, but because it's all in a new case, you get that feels new factor. It scratches that itch for change while not actually costing you very much money. So when I said, yeah, your graphics card is dead, we've got to put a new graphics card in it, he said, oh, okay, could you put it in a new case while you're at it? And I said, okay. So there's a couple of other things as well with this. The computer was dusty as hell inside when I started looking at it. I've got this all disconnected where I've had it all out already. The computer was dusty as hell inside, and I mentioned this to the customer, and he was just like, yeah, I try to keep it clean, but dusty house. And I can relate to that. That is a problem that some people do get, where no matter how often you clean your computer, it just seems to attract dust like no one else's business. So what I decided to do, the client gave me basically free rein to put it in whatever case I wanted within budget. And the budget was like, they were looking for sort of, £60, £70 tops, that kind of money, which is enough to buy a premium brand case. So I had a look around. I did want to pick up something a bit different that we hadn't seen before. But in the end, I decided on a Corsair 275R Airflow, which is the same case that we did on the last build. However, this time I bought it in black for something slightly different. So we're just going to rebuild it in a 275R Airflow. And the reason why I chose the Airflow was we've used one of those before, and I like it as a case. I think it's a good case. And also, what I want to do with this one is I want to make sure that we go all intakes and minimal exhaust, or at the very least heavily intake oriented. And what that's going to do for us is it's going to give us positive air pressure in the case. And that means that because there's positive air pressure in the case from more intake than exhaust, it's going to try and blow air out of all the nooks and crannies of the case, which means this doesn't make you immune to dust, but it does mean that all of that dust will stack up on the front panel where there's a nice, easy to remove dust filter. So the idea is that if we build this computer into a positive air pressure setup, we should be able to make maintenance really easy and make sure that all of the dust buildup that the customer is suffering from builds up just on the front panel, where he can literally just whip that dust filter out, give it a blow, give it a whack outside, put it back in, and he's done. And that should minimize the amount of hassle that the dust is causing. This case is so weird that it didn't have USB 3 front panel on it. It just had these fly leads that went out the back of the case and plugged into the back of your motherboard. So presumably it was very, very early USB 3 before USB 3 front panel was common. But like, this had USB 3 at the front of it anyway, so just screw this case, man. So yeah. What else is there to talk about? So the original card that came out of this case, by the way, I pulled that out. It's our old friend, the Radeon R9 280X Vapor X. Excuse me, I've got the hiccups. By Sapphire. We've seen one of these on the channel before with a dead fan, and this one is kaput. But I'm not really going to shed any tears. While it was a big, expensive graphics card in the day, now it's just an old clunker that is not particularly powerful and produces more heat than a small star. So yeah. So that's coming out. I'm a bit worried about the power supply in this thing. However, it does work. I do want to give it a more dust out once we've got it out of the case. It's I don't even know how much power is in there actually, but it's a Novatech unit, and on these Novatech builds, I think this is kind of the power supply that I would expect to die at this kind of period in its lifetime. You know, I can't remember off the top of my head what year 3rd gen Intel is, but off the top of my head, I'm thinking like, I don't know, what, 2011? 2011, maybe 2012? So, you know, this thing's clocking on for 8 or 9 years old. But hopefully, if we clear all of the dust out from it, it should limp on a bit longer. Let's see. That is a chassis fan. There's a lot of wiring going on in this thing. We'll make it nice and tidy as well. The customer doesn't actually really care much about the looks of this computer, hence why they gave me free reign of the case. But I'm going to make it look pretty anyway. I'll give them a reason to care about the looks, because some people don't really care about the looks just simply because they've never had a pretty computer. And maybe when he sees it, he'll be like, oh, actually that's really nice. That much being said, is your computer truly really nice if there's no RGB in it? Right, there's our platform out. I usually call, when I say platform, I'm usually talking about the motherboard, CPU and RAM, basically. This has still got a lot of dust on it, even after giving it a good air compressor run. We'll give this thing a good clean out. Right, now I'll just zap out the power supply. Then we've got a hard drive and SSD, and the DVD drive we're ditching. Alright, what is this? 650 watts. Power Station Black Edition. It's a quad rail, 18 amps per rail, which is okay. I'm not a big fan of quad rails unless they're load balancing, which these are not. What I mean by that is if you take a power supply like my Antec, each rail it's got like quad 40 amp rails. Now obviously if you add all of those up, that adds up to way over the label spec, and it can't actually deliver 40 amps on all of those rails at the same time. but if you've got a high draw load on one rail, it can load balance over to that rail. Not exactly sure how that is done, but that is clearly what it can do because that's what the label says it can do. Whereas on this one, we've only got 18 amps per rail, so the total wattage is good. However, if you had, like for example, this graphics card is a perfect example of that. Big heavy graphics card, we had 2 PCI Express power cables going to this. However, a power supply like this is exactly the kind of scenario where running one PCI Express cable with a double connector on it might be your undoing. Because that one PCI Express cable, even though these cables can carry lots of wattage, because it's coming off of one 18 amp rail, there's actually only 18 amps going onto that cable. However, so in this case, with this power supply, with the 2 cables, these will presumably... yes, they are. It is labelled on this one. So we've got rail 4 on here and rail 3 here. So we've divided the load of the graphics card across 2 of the rails. So you've got 2 of those 18 amp rails going out to the graphics card. So it's quite nice that this one's labelled. A lot of power supplies are not labelled like that. God, just come out. I don't care. Just... please release me, let me go. Ugh. Got it. Okay. Hard drive, which I've screwed in on both sides because, of course, it is. $860 Evo 500 gig, good SSD. All right, one stripped case. I'll leave the DVD drive in there for now. Okay, right, we're done with the old case. I'm going to do a little bit of tidying up here. Now, when I was doing diagnostics on this computer, I did do thermal tests, and the temperatures on the CPU were absolutely fine. Technically, there is absolutely no need for me to remove this CPU cooler. It's not running hot, it's fine. And a lot of people will be like, oh, that's got old thermal paste in it and stuff like that. It's like, so? It's fine. The load temps were like mid-60s. It's fine. But I'll take it off anyway, because I'm sure people will shout at me in the comments if they don't. And also, I just want to just dust off this motherboard a bit more. So I'm kind of just going over it with a paintbrush here. If you're in a country that is susceptible to static, take static precautions. I am not in an area that is susceptible to static, so I'm not going to bother. Probably worth just taking this off just so I can really get the dust out of it properly as well. Right. How does this come off? Am I going to turn that fan around as well? I'm guessing it was designed for the pull configuration. Perfect. Right, I'm going to go over all of this with the air compressor to get the last bits of dust out, and then I shall return. Sneaky little peel here. The original installer missed that one. Right, I have cleaned up the CPU and the cooler. It's an i7 3770K for those of you playing along at home. And my thermal paste is never where I need it. No. There we go. That's a bit too much, actually. That's way too much. There we go, that's better. Nah. There we go. Watch how it doesn't matter when I put the cooler on. Oh, before we put the cooler on, I'm going to check these. They could be a little bit tighter. So just to explain that bit, when you put the cooler on and the pressure goes down onto the cooler as you screw it down into place, all of that thermal paste will just smush out in all directions. As long as there is a sensible amount of thermal paste, the actual application pattern makes basically no difference. However, I usually go with the cross method because the exception to that rule is the pea-sized dot in the center is the weakest of the patterns. But on Intel, because you've got a monolithic die where it's just a square in the middle, on Intel the pea-sized dot doesn't actually matter. However, on AMD, you actually want to do a little bit of spread on there. And generally speaking, a cross is just fine. However, people will argue about thermal paste patterns till the end of time. So, you know, do what works for you. Feel free to experiment. For me, I've never had problems with X marks the spot. So that's what I'm doing. There we go. Fresh new thermal paste. Let's get that fan back on. I'm going to turn the fan around so the cable comes out at the bottom. And in fact, I'm going to put it that way around so it comes down here. So it has to go across because that will take up some of the slack as well. Whereas previously, the person who built this computer saw fit to have the cable coming out right up the top where it was like in plain sight, which is gross. There you go, and that just sits down the bottom there, invisible. Right, that is ready to go in. I'm going to go and give the power supply an airline blowout, and I'm going to unbox the case, and we'll get that prepped up for the motherboard and the rest of it. Right, one Corsair 275R Airflow in black, with very tight screws on it. There are a couple of other airflow cases that I'm dying to have a look at, but they are really hard to get at the moment. It's funny how just in the year 2020, just as soon as one thing stops being in short supply, something else seems to be hard to get hold of. There's just always a shortage of something these days. And at the moment, it seems to be just airflow cases. They're very hot right now. Everyone wants them. There's one specifically that I really want to look at, and that's the Fantex P500A. But I can't find one for love nor money. Or, well, certainly not the RGB one that I want anyway. But there it is. Anyway, this is our new case. I've taken off the side panel. I'm going to take off the back panel as well, because there's going to be a box of goodies in the back of this. Alright, here's our box of fittings. There's that. Alright, and while I'm here, with the hard drive tray out. I'm going to dust off the hard drive and put it in there. In goes one. And I'm going to put the SSD in this other one. Now, I'm fully aware that these guys are here. These are designed for SSDs to be fitted to them. However, I don't like these mount points because they're a pain in the ass to get the power cables to. And if you put one, if I put the SSD down here, we now only need one power chain that will go to both drives. So why would I run a chain either, well, why would I run either two chains from to here and to here, or have to stretch one from here to here when I could just run one chain to here? If you're not running many drives, there's, not a lot of point in using these, in my opinion. However, it does mean that the case effectively has 4 bays instead of 2, which is why they go for that. Now I'll put our power supply back in. Now, this case has a vented power supply enclosure. And what I mean by that is, here, there is a vent on the top and the bottom of the power supply enclosure. So you can mount your power supply whichever way up you prefer. Now, again, because we're going for anti-dust here, and because this is my normal way of doing it anyway, I'm going to mount the power supply fan pointing up, which means the power supply will be drawing in air from inside the case. Ooh. Which means the client doesn't have to clean the bottom dust filter. Now, this dust filter is quite easy to remove and clean. However, if we have it pointing up, it doesn't need to be cleaned at all. Now, this is intaking air from inside the case, which has already gone through the front filter. There's a big discussion to be had over whether, graphics card temperatures and hot air into the power supply and stuff like that. Your PSU really doesn't mind. I've never had a problem, ever, with that. So, yeah, I'm mounting it that side up. But again, you can build whichever way works for you. Some cases have a cutout window so you can see the power supply. And if your power supply stickers are that way inclined, you may want to mount it the other way up just so the stickers are the right way up for aesthetics. As usual, I'm just putting in the screws halfway, well, most of the way, just so it's loose. And that just means the power supply can joggle and move around while I fit the screws in. And we don't have to force anything. Let's sort out these cables now. We probably don't... I probably could have pulled half of these cables out, actually. Like, we've got a legacy Molex chain here, where the old case had a whole load of Molex fans plugged into it. We don't have any of these in this one, so I'm actually going to pop him out. There we go. That can come out. Oh, I might be in trouble with my shenanigans. Oh no! The 80... damn it! The CPU 8-pin is a very short cable, and I don't think it's going to reach with the power supply mounted this way up. I'm going to flip it over and see if it will reach the other way around. Yeah, it'll reach with the power supply flipped over. You win this round, fan down fans. Right, where was I? Sorting cables. ATX, going to go somewhere up there. All of these are going to go somewhere that's not in here. Oh, they're tied in. Wait, hold on a minute. Oh. This has 2 CPU power cables. Oh, fair enough. I'm quite surprised to see a power supply like this. Well, it's a 750 watt. It's big enough to have 2 EPS connectors on it. That's fair enough. It'd be nice if we could remove one of them because we don't need both, but there it is. Okay, our spare EPS I will coil down the bottom of the power supply enclosure because that's not needed. The new graphics card we're putting in is a 1660 Super, which is not going to need twin 8-pin, so I'm also going to coil one of the spare PCIe 8 pins down there as well. That's going to go down there. This guy is going to go up through the bottom. And then finally, our SATA chain goes into the hard drive enclosure and plugs into the hard drives, or the hard drive and the SSD rather. Right, that'll do back there for now. We need to get our motherboard in to see where everything else is going. Here's the I/O shield that I've removed from the old case. Don't forget about that before you chuck your old case out. Pop that in the back. Okay, now we're going to offer up the motherboard to see if we need to move any of the standoffs. On most premium cases, and generally on pretty much all cases now, all of the standoffs will come pre-fitted. However, you just want to drop the motherboard in and just have a look to see if they're all in the right place. So we'll put that down there. As if we're going to fit it. Got to line up all the spiky bits on the I/O shield. This one's a tough one. I need a prying tool, or the back of my tweezers. Okay, and our screw holes are all good. So these three down the end are unused because this board is a little bit on the short side, so it doesn't reach over there. So that's fine. The usual suspects that you might have to move are either this one or this one here. This guy here is sometimes about there-ish, and this guy here is sometimes about there-ish. So yeah. Luckily on this Corsair case, the center screw there has just got a little lip that just sticks up slightly and makes it really easy. It just holds the motherboard in place while you screw it in. And I'm going to check what thread our standoffs are. They are Imperial thread, which is the coarse thread. So as you can see in the packets of screws that have come with the case, we've got some metric threads here. Those are M3s. And then we've got the Imperial ones, which is like it's 32.2 or 32.6 or 36.2 or something like that. Imperial threads make no sense to me. Well, actually, they make a lot of sense. It's to do with the number of revolutions per inch or something like that. But whereas the metric ones, they just have a numbering system, which is easy to remember. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'll just get the CPU power cable in, which would have been a lot easier if we didn't already have the cooler on, but then the cooler would be a lot easier to fit before we put the motherboard in. There's always something that requires fine hands to reach. Now it's time for front panel cables and all the noodly boys. Oh. Put a big old fold into that cable. Now because we've got no screws along the end of the motherboard here, I'm not just going to push down on this guy because we'll bend the motherboard. So I'm going to get my fingers underneath the motherboard there so I can push down against my fingers. Because this is an old motherboard and an old power supply, that just clicked in super easily. Obviously, if you're building brand new, going to be a little bit harder than that. One of the nice things about working with old stuff, though, is obviously all the plugs are already worn out, so everything just clicks in. It's lovely. Right, front panel. Okay, right, our front panel is slightly different to normal on this one. I'm not going to give I was about to do the usual, oh, here's where all the front panel pins go, but this one is slightly different. However, as per usual, it is silk screened on the motherboard. It's impossible to show it on camera, but just along the back there's tiny little writing. All the white text here, this is called the silk screen on the motherboard. And it does actually have tiny little writing down there, which shows you where everything goes. So we've got power LED, which is going in the usual place in the top. And as per usual, all the positives go toward the back of the case. Then underneath that, we've got the hard drive LED. Now, this case doesn't have a hard drive LED. So actually, I'm going to relocate the power LED to the hard drive LED, because I prefer to have a hard drive LED personally. Then the power switch is back here. And our reset is next to it. That's a bizarre layout for a front panel. Now we'll start populating some PCI Express slots. And then we've got just a couple of screws left to go. Right, what are our options for chassis fans? Got one up there, and we've got one there. And that's our lot. There's not a lot here. So the two front fans that are our intakes on this, we've got quite a long distance to go there. Okay, I'm going to move this fan at the back down to the front and go for the triple intake. And that's going to set up the positive air pressure that I mentioned. Now, because we don't have enough fan headers on this motherboard, I'm going to do the customer a solid and I'm going to lob in a triple fan splitter. So this is a 4-pin splitter, so 3 fans into 1 header. I wouldn't recommend doing this with really high power fans. However, these are just bog standard airflow fans that are, I don't know, 0.38 amps. You know, they're not high power fans. A header will have no issues powering 3 of these at the same time. And the way it handles the speed sensor is only one of these, in which case this one has the yellow speed sensor pin there, and the others, you'll notice, are missing the yellow speed sensor wire. So it just senses the speed of just one of the fans, so it doesn't get confused. And I'm going to run that off chassis fan 2. And that is going to go from around there. So I want all of these wires going around the back. Let's go vertical. These case fans are only 3-pinners. However, I don't have a 3-pin fan splitter because a 4-pin one costs basically the same amount, so why would you buy a 3-pin one? However, because we have got a 4-pin header plugged into the motherboard, I'll probably want to actually just double check that the motherboard is correctly sending a DC controlled signal to these fans, because it may mistakenly think that there are 4-pin fans connected. I doubt it, but we need to just double check that just in case. The vast majority of motherboards will have a manual select though, so you can manually specify whether you're doing PWM control or 3-pin control. Right, and last item of business while I've got the case upright, I'm just going to run a couple of SATA cables out to our SSD and our hard drive. And I just happen to have a couple of nice new black ones, so I'll stick in some shiny new ones. We could of course just recover the old ones from the case though as well, but I happen to have lots of new ones lying around. We've got a sound card going into this thing, which is probably better than the onboard audio, in which case it definitely is. However, we need to reroute our front panel audio to this sound card because we don't want the front panel audio going to the onboard audio because that defies the point of having the onboard, the discrete sound card. So I'll get this guy screwed in and then we'll reroute this guy. On modern computers with a decent motherboard, I personally don't think discrete sound cards are actually worth it unless you have really freaking good headphones or speakers. If you want good audio, you're probably better off just buying a USB DAC or something like that, so an external sound card. However, on older computers, possibly as recently as this one, and again, this motherboard doesn't have very exotic audio on it. The chances are this guy is probably giving better sound. So, right, new graphics, GTX 1660. Ha, and you guys thought I'd have a 3080 for this thing. You probably didn't, but whatever. Right, in that goes. And that guy's going to go up to there. I'll just put a gentle fold in that cable. I would love to have low mounted that sound card further down the bottom, but I would rather have it up here because the sound card isn't going to need any cooling, and if I put it down here, then it's going to heavily block off airflow into one of the graphics card fans. I mean, by having up there, it's also trapping heat at the top, but then this top backplate on this graphics card is probably heat trap anyway. Swings and roundabouts, can't really win. Either way, I'm sure it'll be fine. It's not a super high heat computer, this, so we're not going to have much troubles in those ways. And of course, we've got 3 airflow fans down the front here blowing air in this direction, so that's also cool. Right, let's sort this guy out. This is a very odd cable to be running in this direction. And I'll just route that so it just hugs the motherboard. And that just keeps it mostly out of sight. It was good enough. Right, I think we're ready to turn it on and post-test. Right, our fans are already on an automatic profile. They're on a standard profile, and I'm going to leave them as they are. This is not the quietest system in the world, but again, it's going to be quieter than it was before in that Zalman case, because that's quite a noisy guy, that one. Got lots of annoying little side fans and stuff like that. So I'm going to leave this as is. The graphics card fan is also at high at the moment where that hasn't initialized, so that's why I'm hearing a lot of noise from it. However, I'm happy with the setup of this. There's nothing that I really need to change in this. Well, it's not the graphics card, it's the power supply that's really noisy on this thing. That's a mega noisy power supply, that's gross. Ugh. Oh well, time for the peel and then we're done. Oh yes. And remember kids, multi-surface furniture polish keeps all the dust and finger marks off your window. And that is essentially it, everyone. So thanks for tuning into this video. If you've got an old computer that you think feels a bit dated, maybe even a bit slow, it might not be the computer that's slow, it just feels old. And there's a lot to be said about that in my opinion.
This 3rd gen i7, sure, 3rd gen is a little bit long in the tooth, but it probably still runs most games just fine without bottlenecking. Certainly unless you've got a top-end graphics card in there, which we don't here, you'll probably find that your CPU is actually doing all right. In this instance, we've got a new 1660 Super in there, just to replace the old R9 280X. But with the new case that we've put this thing in, it looks and feels like a new build. And that makes you feel much, much better about your PC as well, which is super important. So, thanks a lot for tuning in, everyone. Stick around for the end card. All of my support links and the link to my Discord server are there. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!